All right, hello and welcome to the ePlus and Checkpoint webinar, and our topic today is rapid expansion to the cloud. Are you leaving the door open? As many of you know, the recent events have led many organizations to accelerate their cloud adoption without proper advanced planning and budgeting due to existing data center, scale, and access issues, as well as having the majority of their workforces become remote workforces. With this fast-paced cloud adoption comes agility and power, but also can lead to new security requirements and gaps. Statistics have also shown that most cloud attacks and compromises are the result of misconfigurations and unintended doors left open due to lack of visibility, lack of qualified staff, lack of proper controls, and which ultimately leads to the lack of compliance and other bad and unintended events. My name is Sam Curcio. I'm a client security principal with ePlus, and I'm sorry I missed the memo on the dress attire for this event, but also with me today is that dapper gentleman in his suit and tie, Grant Asplund from Checkpoint, who will also be co-presenting with me today. Today, we're going to have an informative discussion around how ePlus and Checkpoint can help your organization achieve ongoing visibility and compliance and gain the necessary awareness that is needed in maintaining and securing your dynamic cloud deployments. So why ePlus for security? ePlus is a leading technology integrator with a 19-year proven track record, along with $2.1 billion in revenues and security coming in at $450 million, or about 21% of our total revenues. We also have 40-plus locations in the U.S., Europe, and Asia Pacific, 4 managed services centers, and 3 integration centers throughout the U.S. Security is a strong focus for ePlus, and through internal investments and 3 security acquisitions, our security business continues to grow. And in fact, I joined ePlus through a security acquisition back in 2011. One of our big differentiators is our breadth and depth of engineering talent and expertise, who are logging in excess of 80,000 plus hours of client work per year with 400 plus security certifications. In addition, we have a broad solution portfolio that includes security advisory services, advanced integration services, managed security services, which we'll hear about today, and also financing. And financing is a huge element right now during some of these challenging times for organizations where they really haven't budgeted for some of the challenges that they're facing. ePlus also has lots of great industry relationships and we're actively participating in 10 plus industry councils. And last but not least, ePlus has a great and strong leadership team along with a strong balance sheet, which has allowed ePlus to protect our employees, help our customers in these challenging times, and even help to support many charitable organizations. All right, before I hand the microphone over to Grant, that dapper gentleman, I have a few housekeeping items I need to bring up. So there is a Q&A box on your screen. Please feel free to submit a question at any point during the presentation. If we see it and can jump in, we will. Otherwise, we'll address it at the end of the webinar. There's also an area for attachments and links on the webinar dashboard. We have posted a number of assets and website links related to today's presentation that we think might be useful. Please feel free to access them either during or afterwards. We'll also be pushing out some polling questions during the presentation. They'll appear on your dashboard at various points in the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Grant Asplund.
Sam, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you here, and I'm really, really excited to have a chance to talk with you. And I can't tell you how excited I am about our partnership with ePlus. And I mean this, I've got a long history. In fact, I worked with ePlus many years ago when I was with a company that actually had the first in the world purpose-built virtual firewall, a company named Altor Networks. And of course, back then, ePlus was on the forefront of providing security for leading technologies, just as they continue to do today. So Sam and the entire ePlus team, thank you. And I really appreciate you welcoming me today. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to talk about Checkpoint's infinity, but I do always like to start off with this intro just to really make sure people understand, A, we're a software company, and B, our architecture, our product line is very broad, very comprehensive. We're not just a firewall company. But of course, as you know today, we're going to be talking about cloud and cloud security and what are seemingly the biggest or greatest challenges that organizations are facing, and in particularly what those cloud security and compliance challenges are, and then the opportunities you have and maybe some strategies about going about exercising and taking advantage of those opportunities. You know, this is a very, very sharp double-edged sword, the cloud. It has some unbelievable capabilities and benefits, but certainly there are severe consequences that you have to really pay attention to, and largely they're centered around nuances. Now, just for some perspective, apologize about bullet 2. I'll point it out. It's a typo. It should be 2023, not 2020. But all this other data just really speaks to the enormity of the cloud. It speaks to how fast and huge the adoption has been. And, you know, the thing that I really like to remind everyone is how different it is, because we've so long been accustomed to building this empire on premise of everything that we have. And now all of a sudden, this whole notion, many of the concepts and notions that we've had are gone. And I'm talking about perimeters and this hyper-connected environment we're in really does introduce some significant challenges. But if you have the right tools, the right partners, the right expertise, I would suggest, and in fact, this is backed up from some of the largest analyst firms in the business, you can actually have a more secure data center in the public cloud than you can on premise. Furthermore, you're going to have more agility. You're going to have more capabilities. You're going to be able to move at the speed of cloud. And I think that's what we really all are hoping for. So you're going to get first question is going to come out, or maybe it already has. I might have missed that one. I think I did. It was after slide 5. My apologies. But would love to have you answer those as I go through. We've got a few more that are going to be coming out. In fact, this is data that comes from the Cybersecurity Insider's Cloud Security Report. We're in the process of getting another one conducted currently. How does this size up to your findings, your environment? I'd be curious. You know, we believe far and away that it's going to be multi-cloud. It's going to be hybrid. You know, we certainly in America and all around the world have a long tail of on-premise that many want to pull along. And we don't see a growing percentage of single cloud. On the contrary, as you saw in the data previously, you know, companies are using multiple clouds. And this is part of the problem, because while they're all summiting the same mountain, I would argue they're each taking different paths when we're talking about public cloud for sure. So you should have another polling question coming out now. Please take a second, give us your comments and thoughts. We'd just like to get some greater insight from you. So, you know, I'm a simple man, and, you know, I always jokingly say I'm no professor, I'm a Gilligan. You know, I'm not the highly technical one. So I tend to look at these challenges in maybe a little bit of a different view. analogies work for me, and hopefully this will work for all of you. Both of these images represent places to go swimming. I don't think anyone would dispute. But the one on the left, you're going to care far more about pH and chlorine level and whether or not there's enough water in the pool. You've got to grab the hose and fill it up if it's not full enough. The one on the right, constantly being replenished, constantly changing, and you're very likely much more concerned about what might bite you or eat you. And I think that this really does kind of demonstrate the similarities yet differences and nuances. And my point would be that, you know, one cloud provider calls it blob and another one calls it S3, right? These are nuances that you need to homogenize and harmonize within your environments as you're using these multiple cloud environments. And it also is what contributes to the potential errors. You know, we're all busier than a three-headed cat at a bird show, and so those little subtleties can have severe consequences. Missing a checkbox or just an oversight on not properly deleting something. Furthermore, one of the things I just love is I overheard a conversation between a network manager and a network engineer, and the network manager says, "Hey, Ed, you know how to use a load balancer, right?" Ed, "Yeah, I've been using F5 load balancers for a bunch of years." "Oh, okay, well, can you get that ELB configured?" You know, it's the same, sure, a load balancer, but far different. And the subtleties and nuances are what will end up getting you. Furthermore, because if I'm going to take, many of you, I suspect, recall that transition when we went from fixed appliances and we went into virtualization. Thank you, Stanford, right? We all of a sudden got some utilization of our hardware that was acceptable, but we introduced new challenges. All of a sudden there was this stuff called vMotion and inter-VM communications. And so you needed to get new tools for these new challenges. And ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest we are there again, and we need new tools and new resources to address this new environment. Now, more data from the research, unequivocally, the top two concerns operationally, visibility from a security perspective, and compliance. And I'll tell you, the compliance issue is a big one, and it goes back to that constant churn. The security is a big one because it's now no longer required for me to get into your data center with a card key. I mean, if I have access, I'm able to get there, and all the doorknobs are just hanging there for me to rattle. And that's the new world that we're in. And, you know, many organizations, what they're first, I'm going to caution anyone and everyone that has heard the lift and shift promise to slow your roll, back away from that car. I would really encourage you to think twice about that. Have a long talk with Sam, and I think he'll tell you straight up that that's not the best strategy for you to be able to move in and move at the speed of cloud. Furthermore, the data shows that while you may get some limited functionality out of those existing tools, the traditional environments don't work. I mean, just think about it, right? The things that are different in the cloud, servers appear and disappear, functions use multiple public IP addresses in seconds. All of our traditional SIM and technologies just kind of don't know how to deal with that. certainly not without being enriched, not with having context. So when you try to apply the old tools in this new environment, you're going to fall short. Now, I've got a very extensive white paper that I can share with you, and I'll send this on to the ePlus folks, that talks about, we wanted to, look, we know there's lots of bad people with lots of nefarious intentions. And we just wanted to really kind of demonstrate through actual data what happens when I go and stand up a cloud environment. And so that's what we did. We just stood up a standard public cloud account with the basic, access controls. But then we also decided we wanted to get a little bit more insight of what's going to happen. And this, I thought, was really quite remarkable, that literally in the first 15 minutes, we're getting, the door knob shaken and rattled, with multiple SSH telnet attacks, scripting, network-based attacks, all in 15 minutes. And oh, by the way, I failed to mention, there was nothing in this cloud account other than, of course, access control, username and password. And what happened in a week? So, just think of your own environment. You stand up your cloud environment because you're thinking about, or you're planning on moving into the cloud, and maybe things aren't moving around and moving along quite as quickly. You've got process, you've got people to get involved, you've got training to complete. So you stand this account up. This is what happens. This is what happens just by having the cloud account. So you can understand the consequences can be severe if you make a boo-boo. If you happen to leave port 22 open, if you happen to not encrypt your data, if you allow and enable over excessive access privileges, if you don't change your way of thinking into this new world that really calls for zero trust, microsegmentation, and really I would suggest the speed of technology is one thing, but when you include the way the cloud is moving, it's, I think, why you need partners, you need expertise, you need people that really have the investment in the resources and tools, because God knows we all are understaffed. We don't have as many people as we need, because there's some terrific capabilities, but there's also some dangers. And the other thing I'll add about this data, this really shows the excessive and abundant use of automation on the part of the bad guys. And so take this as a reminder, you all need to do the exact same thing and implement automation, implement auto remediation, leverage the tools, leverage bots, because they're using them against us. And, the fact, it's kind of frightening that 1 out of 4 don't even know. And we all know, we've heard various spins on this data that says we've all been hacked. If we don't know it, it's because we don't know it. But what this really shows is the need to have that starting point in any security solution, and that's visibility. I don't think anyone would dispute that this is what's absolutely critical. Now, there's a great deal of pressure that's getting imposed on enterprise IT organizations, because the fact of the matter is they're understaffed. The pace of technology, we all know, is screaming. And if any of you, which I suspect all of you have, look or have looked at what Microsoft, Google, and Amazon are offering and releasing on a weekly basis, monthly basis, the new capabilities, the new solutions, the new applications. I mean, drinking from a fire hose is an understatement. And all the while, they're supposed to keep up with all this new stuff and the old stuff. I mean, it's a daunting task. And I know the desire is, boy, we got to get into that cloud. Look at all that. Look, we remember when we had that outage because we couldn't scale, when we had that peak because everybody was trying to log on? We wouldn't have that problem, right? But you're also so eager to jump in that boo-boos get made, and we hear about them all the time. And this is why, again, I'm going to emphasize the critical need for partners, for key partners, for the intelligence. I mean, look, this was just, a few, and every one of them could have been avoided with the proper tools, with the proper oversight, with the proper partners implemented and put in place. So, I mean, it just really, and this goes on and on and on. And it's why we hear from the analysts that, at least 99% are going to be the customer's fault. And what's difficult is it's that unification. It's that harmony, if you will, across all of those disparate environments, because they're all running together, right? It's like this watercolor that things just all mesh together, and it's called the cloud, where before you had this very tightly defined world, and now we've got public cloud, we've got private cloud, we're federating our authentication, we're using functions, we're going serverless, we're using a little Azure, we're using a little AWS, we got some Google, all of this. And oh, by the way, like the complexity of the finest watch, every one of those little pieces is constantly moving. But unlike that watch, it's not in a uniform and consistent manner. It's ephemeral. It's changing all the time. And so the challenges that you are going to have, and that, frankly, this exciting new service offered from ePlus, leveraging our platform, what they can do is they can provide that harmony, that homogenization, that unification that gives you the clear visibility into all of your workloads. And that's the key starting point, with really unprecedented capabilities on customization of compliance rules, really tight identity and access management controls. It's really exciting. It's a powerful, powerful tool. Now, in order to really make sure that you're maintaining the maximum level of security and compliance, there are a number of components that are required. And they all, again, have to work in unison and together. And certainly you need support. That we've got dozens and dozens of compliance bundles pre-built in the CloudGuard Dome 9 platform. And these are all compliance bundles as defined by the cloud providers and implemented by us based on their definitions. But they're incredibly comprehensive. And these range from NIST, HIPAA, PCI, GDPR, and the list goes on and on. You have to have the ability to go in and see all of your assets and then categorize and really present in a rich visual manner all of your inventory. You need to be able to visualize all these assets and have a quick risk view of those assets so that you understand what's in trouble and what isn't. I spoke about auto remediation. You're never going to be able to take advantage of all the great things that are in the cloud if you don't also take advantage of all the great things you can do in the cloud, like auto remediation. I mean, it's a must. And so you need to find the tools and the partners that can build the policies and rules to have effective auto remediation implemented. And, you know, it's so easy because remember, I don't have to get into your data center. You need to have the ability to ensure when you set a rule, a template, a configuration requirement, no one can mess with it. And you have to have that tamper resistance. I talked already a little bit about identity and identity privilege. You know, it's the world's changing where before, oh, you're part of the IT team, we'll put you in this bucket with everybody else and you can do everything. You know, we went just the opposite. And now you can expect to see over the course of the ensuing years, every single function, every piece of code, every asset, they're all going to have identities. And those identities are going to have their subsequent access management policies associated with them. We're going into a new world. And it is going to zero trust. And you need to have the tools that can manage effectively these trends. Microsegmentation, also from an architectural design, you know, the way my oversimplified description of microsegmentation is, you know, we're accustomed to having 200-foot piece of rope, and if there's a problem anywhere in the rope, we have to buy a new rope. And microsegmentation is that same 200 feet of rope that I cut into 100-foot or 1-foot pieces that all magically fit together, so that if I now have 200 1-foot pieces, and if there's a problem anywhere, I go to that 1 foot where there's a problem, I take it out, I fix it, and it's far less disruptive, it's far more efficient, but it does take a new way of looking at your environment. So, just kind of walking through some of the key things to remember when we're automating our compliance. You know, again, starting point, you have to have the tools that are going to be able to see all of your assets, all of your workloads. And I mean all of them, from containers to Kubernetes, across all of the public cloud environments. This is absolutely critical. And then, as I mentioned previously, you need to be able to identify and easily select and enforce compliance, multiple compliance frameworks if required, and to be able to evaluate the results and then modify and customize based on your environment. And I can't stress enough, some 46% of the respondents from that previous study I mentioned said that custom compliance rules are critical. Moving on. Constantly monitoring and checking. I always say compliance in the cloud is sort of like being in a one-man sailboat in a windstorm. You know, you've got to constantly be checking, monitoring, and this is why you need tools to help you automate the remediation of things you discover that are off. Because if you're the one that's constantly having to do it, you're going to get behind, you're going to get lapped, and you're going to fail. And then finally, crystal clear reports and auditing are a must. Not only that you can distribute, but you also need to be able to send out and distribute to the rest of or other parts of your infrastructure. You know, I was reading a report from Gartner, and Thomas Kroll and the main author, Neil McDonald, and the headline is, you can actually make your data center more secure than your on-premise data center. Your cloud data center can be more secure, but it absolutely is imperative that you're implementing some posture management service or capability. It's critical. It is, in fact, their first building block. And their suggestion is not, even if you're not using more than one cloud provider, the unification that it provides, the oversight that it provides, is really key. And I got to tell you, having a partnership and knowing that I now can refer clients to ePlus and they'll be offering a managed service utilizing this platform, this is really exciting, because this is what will unshackle many of our customers and allow them to really scream and utilize, because they don't have to be burdened with how to manage and maintain all this stuff and go through the take the licks, so to speak, and wounds to getting it right. So this is an exciting new partnership we have with ePlus, offering the managed services using CloudGuard Dome 9. I think you'll probably get another question if you haven't here recently. I think it's my last one, so I promise we won't be bugging anymore with that. CloudGuard Dome 9, and, if I can just briefly mention, I was with Checkpoint in 1998 when there was 400 employees through an acquisition, and ironically, 20 years later, I was at Dome 9 working for my longtime friend Zohar Alan, one of the co-founders, and 3 months later, we get acquired by Checkpoint again. So it's like deja vu all over again. And it's really exciting to be here. And for those of you that don't know, Zohar Alan was the person that essentially created and owned a product called Provider One. And Provider One is used to be described as the manager of managers in the Checkpoint architecture. And it was what we sold to and provided to the biggest and largest service providers in the world that were offering managed security services. And at the time, this was managing many firewalls, right? Well, I think it's important to mention that, to assure anyone and everyone that's listening that you've got an architect or one of the founders, original founders, that really understands this hyper-connected, multi-tenant world that we're in now, that each one of you have, where before it was really just managed services for, lots of other customers. And now, we're all having to essentially function and operate that way with multiple clouds and all of the workloads that we have operating in our environment. So I think it's really important to see how this platform has evolved and expanded to really have that visibility across any workload within Azure, within AWS, within Google, Kubernetes. We've got threat intelligence with our Logic platform, the compliance engine, visibility with Clarity, and all of this has been designed to tightly integrate with your ticketing system. So when there is an issue, it's going to step right into that notification, will work right into your workflow, right into your overall ticketing systems, as well as be able to share and integrate with tools like Slack and Splunk and others. So we've really tried to create a platform. All the while, I encourage you to please take a look at CloudBots. It's cloudbots.io. It's an open source project curated by Dome 9, but there are, I don't know how many, a bunch of already made bots available. For example, if I have any S3 buckets that aren't encrypted, go encrypt them. Those types of efficiencies are available. I really encourage you to take a look at it. And moreover, I really encourage you to connect with your ePlus representative and ask them to show you a demonstration of the tool, the flexibility, the customization, the reports. I think you'd really, really be impressed. So with that, I want to thank you all very, very much. I would love to hear from you. You can email me or let's connect on LinkedIn. With that, I'm all finished. Sam, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thanks, Grant. Thank you all to the audience who's been participating in the polling questions. And also just a reminder that we do have the Q&A box, and we will be getting to questions. We do have some out there. And at this point, I'm going to take over and kind of go through some of my agenda items as well. Again, great job there, Grant, on the information you provided there. And we also are very excited about our partnership with Checkpoint and our new offerings as well. So I'm going to cover some things that I think are very important, which is many organizations look at Gartner and Forrester. I'm going to talk about Gartner's top 10 security projects for 2020. I'm also going to give you kind of my cloud security best practices, kind of the top 9. I'm also going to briefly cover a case study around a cloud program maturity assessment. We've got lots of case studies. So this is just one example. I'm also going to talk about our public cloud security assessment and other offerings, and then I will kind of close out with our managed services offering that was brought up earlier, and then we'll kind of go into the Q&A session. So as I dive into Gartner's top 10 security projects for 2020, and if you've been monitoring this, things seem to kind of move around a little bit up and down, but what you'll notice is that privileged access management is kind of top of that list, which is really, you know, an effort to make sure that organizations are protecting the keys to the kingdom. So all those service accounts, all those administrative accounts, all those access keys, et cetera. We still continue to see a lot of organizations get compromised due to reused credentials, reused service accounts, et cetera. So this is top of the list. This is definitely something that we are seeing a lot of organizations start to get more proactive with, and it is definitely one that we can help customers with. And then vulnerability management. So if you've looked at a lot of the compromises and the things that have been out there, they've been due to the fact that organizations just have so many different technologies and devices on their networks, and they're not properly being managed from a vulnerability perspective. And so one of these other areas that we help with is a vulnerability management as a service for customers. Obviously, finding those vulnerabilities and patching them is most critical, or coming up with some sort of compensating controls is most important. But vulnerability management still continues to be an area that we also see a lot of weaknesses in organizations. They have the tooling, sometimes they have the resources, but they really just don't have the emphasis on making sure that those scans get run often enough, or that the appropriate networks are being scanned, because there's so many networks being spun up and down. And then endpoint. Obviously, right now we've got just a whole lot of organizations, obviously including ourselves, that are working remote. So those endpoints that are out there, your machines, they haven't seen the corporate network, and you know, hopefully they all have some sort of endpoint security technology on them, and hopefully it's reporting home, and hopefully you've got some sort of hygiene system in place, and you're monitoring the actual level of the security of those endpoints. For organizations who are looking for help in that area, we do have workshops. And then obviously with a lot of the cloud adoption with SaaS and PaaS type apps and IaaS, obviously cloud access security broker is another big area, and we actually do a cloud usage and risk workshop. And then obviously cloud security posture management, as Grant mentioned, you know, with the acceleration and adoption of cloud, the first thing that customers lose is visibility. And that's one of the key elements that a cloud security posture management tool gives you, is the first piece is visibility. Without that, you really can't do anything around data security or protection. You have to know what's going on. You actually have to know what's out there. You have to have some sort of data classification program in place as well to know what you need to protect out there. And several other areas here that we help customers with. But Gartner's top 10 is definitely one that we monitor, and we know our organizations and customers monitor as well. So my best practices are pretty key. So I think the foundation for any good and effective security program really starts with a vision, and that vision really has to have leadership support. So you have to have that top-down approach. And you need the key and right people in the organization involved in that program and helping to support it. And you need to document it. It shouldn't be something that's just a discussion that happens and basically it's a moving target. You need to document it. You also need to make sure that you communicate those plans throughout the organization and you train them, and most importantly, you have accountability. And I'm going to pick on this first one here a little bit, and that's shared responsibility. So when organizations move or transition things to the cloud, I think the first thing you need to really understand is there's a shared responsibility model that exists. And basically that shared responsibility model is key for organizations to really evaluate whether you're going to Office 365, you're going to Azure, going to AWS, you're going to Google. There's a level of shared responsibility. It's really not a risk transference here. So you need to clearly understand what your level of responsibility is and also what your third-party provider's responsibility is. And then also establishing a cloud center of excellence, or a CCOE. ePlus has one. We provide that to our customers. We also ask that customers also put that in place, and we can help to provide advisory around that as well. And then making sure you have some sort of third-party risk standard and risk matrix. And this is key and important. So as you start to transition any of your data and information into the cloud, there should be some sort of criteria that you use to evaluate what vendors need to meet as far as standards and ongoing testing to make sure that your information and data is protected. I think Grant mentioned this as well, is identity and access management. So when you go to the cloud, you should be looking to federate your identity into the environment, not create some net new island of identities. And you should also make sure you've got good roles and groups and privileges in place there. And ultimately, when you get to a more mature model and you're leveraging IAM, you should be able to have very granular roles in your cloud environment that actually have controls that prevent vulnerabilities and misconfigurations from actually happening. Now, this is a crawl, walk, run approach, but ultimately this is where kind of identity comes into play, is being able to leverage that to federate what you already have on premise. And then obviously leveraging next generation security. So cloud security posture management, cloud workload protection, and CASB are also key solutions that need to be considered. And then encryption. So I see a lot of organizations moving to the cloud and they are not leveraging encryption for data in motion and or at rest. And then most importantly is testing your security program. So don't think that just because the program you've put in place is secure and it doesn't need to be tested by a third party. We oftentimes become desensitized to our own programs because we live and breathe them every day, but we're not open to changing or evolving it. And that's where kind of third parties coming in to help evaluate that and look for gaps and help you solve those is key. And then leveraging third-party partners. So don't go it alone. You know, your acceleration can be much faster and much more under control by leveraging experienced third-party partners. And then training. So, you know, the lack of qualified staff really comes from the fact that organizations are moving to the cloud, but they haven't made significant investments in training. And then the rewards piece is more for larger organizations who certainly have DevOps type areas, and the reward system is kind of a bounty program. So it's really enticing the developers and the security practitioners to really look for vulnerabilities that the organization may have in their applications and finding them before the actual bad actors do, and then rewarding them as such. You'll find that some of the top manufacturers actually cover this as well with that bug bounty program that I mentioned. You can search on that too. So I'm going to dive into shared responsibility just real quick. So the cloud provider is responsible for the security of the cloud, and you as a customer are responsible for things that you put into the cloud. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that, but you know, like I said, every one of the providers has a shared responsibility model where it's AWS, Azure, GCP, Microsoft with O365. They all publish it, but you really have to kind of dig in and figure out where the lines are drawn. So, and the contracts also come into play here as well. And this is just a quick snapshot of where we came from in the traditional on-premise data centers and where we're at today with PaaS and SaaS. So you'll see clearly that, you know, organizations that have IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, what the level of responsibility is, and that needs to be taken very seriously by organizations. And don't assume that when you put things in the cloud that they're going to be secure. So now I'm going to kind of dive in real quick to kind of show an example of, yes, this acceleration gives you a lot of agility and power, and you can do a lot of things. But you know, even the most mature organizations out there still have challenges and struggles when it comes to cloud adoption. This is an example, just again, of one of many case studies that we've actually done, where we actually have a very large organization that's out there. And one of the challenges they were having is they really weren't sure what their cloud security posture was and really what their maturity of their program was. And they had been about 3, almost 4 years into their cloud adoption journey. And they basically, you know, asked us to come in and basically do a workshop with them and also do an assessment of all of their cloud environments that they actually had. And, you know, what we found is that they definitely had a lot of great things that they were doing in the cloud, but they also had a lot of weaknesses and gaps. And that can be attributed to, lack of resources, again, lack of talent, and also lack of visibility and lack of tooling. So in this particular circumstance, we actually applied our cloud program maturity assessment, again, a combination of a on-premise workshop and then also an assessment leveraging the Dome 9 solution. So you get in both a subjective and objective assessment, and then the output of that is actually delivered to a CISO and then also to the technical teams in both an executive and technical overview. And even in this very sizable, large organization, and again, 3-4 years into their journey, we still found a lot of vulnerabilities. So 5,000 deficiencies across all of their cloud environments, and some very significant findings here. And really, what this pointed out was that it doesn't matter the size of the organization, how many people you have. There's still a lot of gaps that exist out there with cloud adoption. Here you'll see, we kind of measured against, different compliance standards. In this particular case, we looked at it from an ISO perspective. Some of the pretty serious findings were, SQL databases not restricted and exposed to the internet. SQL databases not restricted to other environments. Virtual machines accessible via SSH and RDP, and secure transfer not turned on for storage accounts, so that encryption element. So they didn't know, right? That was the biggest challenge. So once we found out what all the issues were, we were able to actually put an actionable plan in place for the customer to remediate these. And as you can imagine, having the amount of vulnerabilities and issues that we found, automation is key, right? Being able to go in and generate scripts and automate the repairs of that was going to be key, because to do that manually would take a significant amount of time. And the other piece is we needed to put a stake on the ground and make sure that the customer knew to prevent this from actually happening again in the future, we got to start to put some policies and controls in place. So that's effectively what we did was a posture assessment for them, and basically came in and gave them a strategy and a roadmap on how to remediate that, and then also some long-term strategies and advisory services as well. So here's some of the ways that we help customers who are unsure of, really what their cloud security posture and maturity is. And it can start off with just a simple health check, which is basically, a free offering that we do for customers to give them an idea about their posture in AWS, Azure, or Google. And from that, if we find any sort of deficiencies, then I'm going to suggest we go on to doing more of a full cloud security posture assessment. And that assessment will actually include both a technical and executive summary reports, and then also a sit down with your executive team to kind of review what the roadmap is for remediation. And then, as mentioned with this case study, the program maturity assessment is actually a combination of a workshop with the interview process of the different resources in the organization. So it's a subjective assessment as well as an objective assessment leveraging the Dome 9 solution. And that really helps to figure out where your maturity is and then also provide that roadmap. But all three of those are going to leave you still in that same state of what do you do going forward and how do I continue to get visibility and monitor those environments. And that's where we've actually come up with our managed security and compliance, or our cloud security monitoring solution or service for our customers. And as we take a look at that, that's actually part of our managed service offering. We've actually got multiple in this area. The first one is cloud cost optimization. One of the biggest challenges that we see that customers face is they go from on-premise to the cloud, and yes, it's great. You can do a lot of things in the cloud, but when they start to see some of the bills because they leave things turned on or they put a lot more computing power than they anticipated, their bills are exorbitant. So they're looking for cost optimization. How do I keep things in bounds? How do I keep things in budget? So we actually do have an offering they've actually built around that. I won't go into great detail about that, but it is an offering. And we do oftentimes see that combined with our cloud security monitoring offering, which is a way for customers to get that continuous risk visualization and awareness across their AWS and Azure environments. And it is part of the cloud security posture management. Again, if you're looking at Gartner, that's where this kind of fits into. And then obviously the other big piece here is, and I'm going to show you in the next slide, is we're actually leveraging our cloud architects and a best-of-breed solution together to give you kind of that continuous visibility. And then also cloud data protection is another managed services offering as well, and especially in times like now where organizations are really stressing their data centers and they're worried about bandwidth and pipes and they're worried about security. They want to get some of that data off premise because they can't go in anymore like they used to. So we're starting to see now a big emphasis on backup and DR as well. So our cloud security monitoring actually primarily focused around AWS and Azure, also can service GCP as well. It's essentially a service designed to help customers kind of offload that burden and where the customers have lack of those resources and the talent and the visibility. So we've actually combined both the Dome 9 and the ePlus resources. So tools as service and architectures as service. And combined, it allows you to have decreased risk and continuous compliance in your cloud environments. And obviously, it's going to help you also to get guidance around best practice provisioning and operationalizing your cloud environments. That does include monthly review sessions around your current state and actually recommended states for the future. So what's included? So ePlus will help to onboard all of your cloud accounts into our Dome 9 environment. And as you add more accounts, we'll obviously be involved to help onboard those. We want all of your environments monitored. This is one of the big gaps we see on vulnerability, and we also see in cloud visibility is people keep adding more subscriptions and accounts, but they're not monitoring, or they add more devices and networks and they're not monitored. So a big gap. And then this is the other big thing too, is giving customers access to their own information. This is key. We don't want to keep customers in the dark. So you will get full access to the dashboards. You'll also get access to our ServiceNow portal so that we can help to manage tickets and make sure you have kind of the appropriate visibility into your environment. And then obviously it's a monthly architecture as a service. So we're constantly monitoring your environment. We're generating reports and recommendations. And then there's obviously an ongoing monthly cadence that takes place where we actually give you executive summaries and details and documentation and also recommendations, which is key and important for keeping the hygiene of these environments secure. So one of the big outcomes here around our security monitoring as well is this allows your organization to focus on what you do that makes your business successful and allows us to help you maintain and optimize your AWS and Azure security posture. Help you also to continuously monitor your environments to make sure you're meeting your compliance requirements, whether that's PCI, HIPAA, NIST, GDPR, et cetera. As Grant pointed out earlier as well, is the flexibility of the solution allows even custom monitoring, and that's a big element. So I talk to a lot of organizations who say, you know, the well-architected framework, the cloud adoption framework, NIST, ISO, this is great, but I also have some things that are above and beyond that. Can I monitor that? And the answer is yes. So we can use these as a baseline, but we can also add other custom rules or rule sets to the monitoring of your environment as well. Even apply specific rule sets or custom rule sets to specific accounts or subscriptions. That's also another big requirement that we see some customers have, like they may have an M&A environment that they want more specific type monitoring of, or they may have a dev or QA environment that they need less on, and prod has even more. So a lot of flexibility there. And then obviously, most importantly is making sure that your organization receives notification when there's an event that needs, you know, a response very quickly, and then also actually how you remediate that as well. So there's a lot here about realizing value for organizations, and this is, I think, a big key, especially during these times right now, is that when we look at our customers and organizations that we've actually helped, and we actually look at, there's a lot of value in what we're providing to our customers, and that's why we build our offerings out, is if we look at customers starting at the bottom and work our way up, we analyze customer spend both around security and around cost in the cloud. And when we see customers that essentially have tried to do it themselves without kind of that lack of qualified staff, you know, their spend is quite significant in trying to accomplish that goal, and they still leave themselves with a lot of gaps, misconfigurations, et cetera. Pretty significant cost there. Organizations who do nothing will definitely have a tangible deficiency around cloud overspend. The security aspect is kind of proven in the stats, right? There's a lot of misconfigurations, a lot of issues that we see as a result of that. But one thing I can tell you is that the customers that we are helping with our managed services around cost op and around cloud security monitoring definitely has a lot better hold and visibility into what their spend is. And as you can see here, it's pretty significant, the reduction in your spend by leveraging a partner who has the experience and capabilities in the cloud. So pretty significant from customers who do nothing or they try to do it on their own. And that cost savings can be used to accelerate other areas of your organization. So very key here is we know value is huge, especially during these points in times. And this is really, you know, a good point for executive leadership to see is if you do nothing, it's going to have an uncontrolled cost and potential consequences. If you try to do something, you might wing it, but you may leave yourself open for exposure, and you're still going to have kind of high cost. But bringing a partner in like ourselves to help you in those areas will definitely have a good cost reduction possibility for you. Can't guarantee you the specific numbers because every organization is different, but value, as we mentioned, is huge. And then also being able to leverage a partner that can also help you in other areas is key too. And that's why, organizations that look to ePlus and have looked to ePlus over the years look at us because we've got the ability to help them in the very beginning stages to develop strategy, right? Whether that's data center or cloud or hybrid, helping to select those platforms if you want to make that transition into the cloud. Whether you want to do hybrid cloud or private cloud, we do all of that, right? And then down to actually designing and implementing, which is our execution layer, right? So making sure that we actually help you to design and implement those solutions because, again, we know about a lack of resources and then also the fact that you're being asked to do a lot of things in a very short amount of time. And then on the operations side is really to help you manage and optimize as you make that journey into the cloud and you continue to stay in the cloud. So lots of key areas here that we help customers. We have lots of different practice areas that we can apply this strategy and platforms and execution and operations to as well. So with that, we are going to get into our Q&A session. Also, just a reminder, we have included the presentation and many links in the attachments and links area. And we also have, I'm going to give you a little bit of stats on the polling questions as well. And also we're going to answer a question. So Grant, I'm going to pop this over to you while I'm looking at the stats from the polling question. So what question should I ask our CISO concerning the Azure security tools he should be using?
Well, I guess I saw that question and I wasn't clear on the context of what Azure security, certainly Security Center and all the tools that are available. One of the things that I think, Sam, you'll agree, and I think it's important to mention, every one of the security providers provide terrific security. Sometimes people misinterpret and think that we're implying that Azure doesn't have good security or AWS doesn't have good security, and quite the contrary. The difficulty isn't leveraging and utilizing their tools. It's harmonizing across multiple environments. It's understanding the nuances, and so it's so my response is going to be make sure your CISO and team are using Security Center and all of the available security functions within Azure. And if you're an Azure-only shop, your difficulties won't necessarily be in those limitations, but they'll be in other areas, more around the posture management.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would say start off with like Azure Security Center is a great example. But most importantly is, a lot of things that we see are that, when organizations go into the cloud and they haven't really put good policies and controls in places, visibility, which oftentimes comes from logs as an example, and by default, we see a lot of logging disabled and turned off because it generates storage, and storage generates cost. So, and oftentimes it's because it really wasn't planned for that I would actually have that cost or need that in the cloud. And so, making sure that you kind of go through a best practices approach of your environment. Azure Security Center is certainly, one solution or tool. Health check from us or even third-party solutions can help in that area as well. To give you what your posture is today and then also recommendations on how you kind of fix it going forward. But it's also not going to be one tool or one solution. It'll be multiple based upon what your environment is and what you have running. If you have containers, you'll need container security. Let's not forget too, there's still vulnerabilities that might exist against what systems might be out there. So, your traditional vulnerability management solutions would come into play. If you have applications that are web hosted out there, you need to look at WAFs, load balancers, encryption. So lots of different pieces, but I would, at a minimum, start with Azure Security Center is definitely a good suggestion. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, there's another question here, Sam. It says, do I need to install agents everywhere? I know with Dome 9 you don't need to. It's no agents at all. I don't know if it's any different for you guys.
No, it's not any different from that aspect. So, the agents will get more into kind of the endpoint specific piece. So
Right.
the containerization, things of that nature would require that. But no, this is, the good news about this is an agentless type of installation.
Yeah. And that's also the trend, right, Sam? I mean, this whole world is kind of in the new world of software-defined everything. It's this prolific and heavy use of APIs that we're seeing so much of, that I think the best tools are the ones that are really tightly integrating and keeping up with those new APIs. But that also makes it challenging, because when one releases APIs on a capability, another may not have the same capabilities, makes it lumpy. Why, again, you need something that kind of smooths it out for you.
Yep, agreed. All right, so I'm going to give some quick stats on the polls, and we're at the top of the hour. So I would say the majority of the organizations said that they had 2 or more cloud vendors in the mix. On the statement of working with multiple cloud vendors poses challenge to my organization, overwhelmingly agreement with that statement, which is kind of what we figured. And then on the question of what is your greatest operational challenges you face, so a pretty good majority around compliance, and obviously a pretty big majority around visibility. I'm a little surprised at the consistency and the sprawl votes.
Yeah.
Only because of the fact that, our cloud security posture assessments that we've done definitely show a lot of lack of consistency, and it's due to the fact that there's a lot of provisioning being done manually. And the other thing that I'll add in there is that the mature organizations that we talk to, they do infrastructure as a code, so they're actually not letting people get into the consoles anymore and actually do things the way they used to. They actually want things to be more automated, which means they have more control and, lack of misconfigurations. So with that, I definitely want to thank everyone for attending. The replay will be available on demand later today. And if you can click on the attachments and links section to access some of the useful information we have posted for you. And we definitely, again, appreciate everyone. Please stay safe. And again, thanks for joining today.
Thanks,
Brant.
You bet. Thanks, Sam.